Greetings, my scattered brothers and sisters in the Lord. Trust you know that the Lord is with you wherever you find yourself scattered today, and that you know that the Lord's presence with you is more than enough for whatever this day might hold for you. We are continuing in John chapter 15. In fact, today we are transitioning from 15 to 16. And in this transition, Jesus continues to remind the disciples that as they remain in him and he in them, that they can expect to face the same type of rejection or response that he received. That just as he was rejected and eventually crucified, so he tells his disciples that they too can expect to be rejected and that some of them will even be put to death just as he was. That as they abide in him and he in them, as they listen, as they obey, as they imitate him, they can expect the same outcome: rejection and perhaps even death. Now, Jesus also emphasizes that he gives the Holy Spirit, and that in all of this, the Holy Spirit will be testifying as to who Jesus is, that he is the Son, and that the disciples are to testify who Jesus is in the very face of this persecution, this rejection, these death threats. So there's a couple things I want us to think about here. The first one is the putting out. So Jesus says that the time will come when people will put you out of the synagogue and even put you to death. And they'll do this thinking that they're actually serving God. Sure enough, we see this come to play in the New Testament. Paul, part of his life before he becomes a Christian, he is trying to put people out of the synagogue and even to death because he thinks that's how to serve God. He's ignorant. And we may not face being put out of a synagogue per se. And while there are certainly parts of the world where Christians are put to death and the persecution is intense, our persecution here is much more subtle, much more seductive. But the putting out, I don't doubt that many of you have experienced some type of putting out because you're Christian. Maybe being put out of your family, maybe being put out of a job or put out of a promotion or put out of a friend group. But because we follow Jesus, at some point along the way, there's all likelihood that you're going to be put out of something. And Jesus says that in the midst of that being put out, that the Holy Spirit will continue to testify as to who Jesus is, that he's the Son, and that we are to continue to testify, to bear witness as to who Jesus is. And we bear witness through word, but we also bear witness through attitude. We bear witness through actions. And so to have the Holy Spirit help us to stay loving in the midst of being put out, there is no stronger testimony than that. To keep on loving when we're not loved. Jesus kept on loving. He went to the cross for the very ones who were putting him on the cross. And so in our being put out, the challenge is to keep loving. And the power to do that comes through Jesus and comes through the gift of his Holy Spirit. That's bearing witness. It's not just words, it's the love. Second thing, Jesus emphasizes that those who put him to death, those who rejected him, did not know who he was. They were ignorant. They didn't know who he was, and so they didn't know who the Father was. And so in their ignorance, they acted in rebellion. And he doesn't make an excuse for rebellion, but he shows that ignorance and rebellion go together. And so maybe in our putting out, being put out of this or that, and the challenge to keep loving, maybe it would be a helpful thing to remember that the people who are doing us wrong, they're pretty ignorant. I don't mean ignorant in kind of a demeaning, condescending way, but just plain ignorant in terms of not really recognizing what they're doing, not really recognizing who Jesus is, not really recognizing who God is. And once we begin to see that someone is acting in ignorance, it's still hurtful and it's still wrong and it's still rebellious, but at the same time, it makes it a little bit more understandable that they just don't know, that they just don't see. And sometimes realizing that, it makes it a little bit easier to have a loving attitude instead of a vengeful attitude. That the ones who put us out, they just don't know. And even when they're acting rebelliously, they just don't know. They don't know Jesus. They don't know the Father. They don't know what they're doing. So, wherever you are scattered today, and if you are being put out today, or if that day is coming, or if you've already been put out, continue to bear witness by the power of the Holy Spirit. Keep loving. And remember, those who put you out, they are ignorant, as ignorant as those who rejected Jesus and put him on the cross. And so, by his power and the gift of his Spirit, stay loving. God bless. Have a great day. And again, keep on loving.